right, well, looks like we've hit our top of the hour. So I'd like to welcome you to the Minnesota and Dakota's Ask the Experts Exercise in Parkinson's. I'm Erin McGee, a program manager for this chapter of the Parkinson's Foundation. Today's program is being recorded, and attendees will receive an email in the following week that will contain the recording, the slides, and other resources. Before we begin, I want to welcome those who are new or joining for the first time today and take a moment to share the mission of the Parkinson's Foundation. We make life better for people living with Parkinson's by improving care and advancing research toward a cure. We have everything you need to live better with Parkinson's. To achieve our mission, we pursue three goals: to improve care for everyone with Parkinson's, to advance research toward a cure, and to empower and educate our global community. And we do this all by building on the energy, experience, and passion of our global Parkinson's community. Our signature event, Moving Day, a Walk for Parkinson's, is coming up just 46 days away on Saturday, May 1st. This nationwide event has raised more than $30 million to support the mission by delivering quality care, funding research, and providing free resources and local services. Moving Day will look a little different this year, but our commitment to making lives better for people with Parkinson's has not changed. My colleagues are planning a virtual option and a drive-through option. So on the day of, on Saturday, May 1st, you can join us in Minnesota for a celebration drive-through event. You'll be able to pick up any of the rewards if you've fundraised with us. So go ahead and check out Moving Day Twin Cities to learn more. And if you're not able to join us in person, we will have that virtual option coming up too. We also have a super cool new fundraiser just a few weeks away. This was really focused on family and fun. It is called Play for Parkinson's, a virtual gaming event. So you can Zoom with your family or friends, or be in person now if that's possible for you, and play a board game or card game. Ask family and friends to throw in $5, $10, or whatever they would like to donate to the Parkinson's Foundation to raise funds and awareness for Parkinson's. So we're excited for the whole state of Minnesota to get together and play games on Saturday, March 27th. To learn more, visit parkinson.org/play4PD to learn more and to sign up. Today's program is sponsored by Amneal, Synovian, and Supernus, whose generosity has made this program possible. Thank you for all your support. To learn more about these companies and the resources they offer the Parkinson's community, including detailed product information, please visit our virtual exhibit hall located at parkinson.org/Minnesota-Dakotas/chapters-support. Super long website. I know I won't remember that, so it will be included in the follow-up email to find more information. You'll be able to click on the sponsors logo to find out more. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will get started with our first presentation. We have Dr. Julia Johnson, who has pre-recorded her presentation and will be joining us live for Q&A following our second speaker. Dr. Johnson is a board-certified neurologist with an interest in movement disorders. During her neurology residency at the University of North Carolina, she developed a passion for caring for patients with Parkinson's disease, which led her to complete a fellowship in movement disorders and Parkinson's disease at Duke University. She joined the neurology faculty at Duke University and focused on clinical research in Parkinson's. Currently, as the clinical director at the HealthPartners Struthers Parkinson Center, her goal is to provide patient care with a focus on education and communication. So sit back and relax as we watched her pre-recorded presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat and we will add those when she joins us live for Q&A.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Julia Johnson. I'm the medical director of the Struthers Parkinson Center at HealthPartners in St. Paul. And today I'll be talking about the role of exercise in Parkinson's disease. So, if you are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, or if you have a loved one that has a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, more likely or not, you probably have heard that exercise plays an important role in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. So today I want to talk a little bit about why that is. So why do we recommend exercise? What kind of exercise do we recommend? How do we start? What would we recommend? How often should you exercise? And then some other more specific questions. I do want to talk a little bit about the question, can exercise slow down the progression of Parkinson's disease? And is there an effect of exercise on cognition and memory function? So those will be my topics for today. Getting started here. Why exercise? Why do we always say exercise, exercise, exercise? So I want to talk about this a little bit here. Most people with Parkinson's are taking medications, and there should be. However, there are some limitations to the use of medications. So, as you may have already experienced, sometimes medications do not cover some symptoms, such as voice function or balance problems, gait instability. So that's where exercise comes in. We, as of right now, do not have a medication that is what's called neuroprotective. So a medication that slows down the progression of Parkinson's. We don't have this right now. And then some people with Parkinson's undergo surgery, not everyone. But the DBS surgery is a good surgery for some people. It often helps improve a lot of symptoms. But again, there are also symptoms, especially gait and balance, that DBS does not improve. Some more obvious benefits of exercise are improvement in motor function that has been studied, and there's a lot of data about this, increase in mobility, also decreased risk of falls and other complications in Parkinson's disease. But also, let's not forget about the non-motor symptoms. So we do know that people that exercise and that suffer from depression may experience an improvement in their symptoms. Memory can improve. I'll talk about that later as well. And other things like fatigue and apathy. If you exercise, you may see a beneficial effect as well. And then more generally speaking, most people know that exercise reduces the risk of other medical problems. So that could be a reduction in heart disease, reduction of being overweight, the risk of that, or other medical problems. So this is just an overview of why we recommend exercise, particularly in Parkinson's disease. Keep in mind, though, that exercise does not necessarily replace the role of medications. So we often work with medications as well, and most people do need to be on medication. So this slide shows you how I typically view the treatment of Parkinson's disease, and it's really a combination of different things. So medication, I already mentioned. Some people have surgery in Parkinson's disease. There's a lot of use of rehab therapies, which is really, really important. So we use physical therapy a lot in Parkinson's disease, and you'll hear more about that later today. Occupational therapy, speech therapy. We use supportive services that it can include anything from social work services, support groups, referrals to psychology, really anything, or maybe something that your caregiver does for you. All of this is important in the treatment of Parkinson's, but in particularly exercise is a part of that, and also cardiovascular exercise, and I will talk more about this later. But if you think about treatment, really think about all these different bubbles and how important each one of them is for the best benefit and best treatment effect in Parkinson's. So the next question is, what kind of exercise is right for you? So let's say maybe you're just diagnosed, maybe you decide, I want to start exercising, but where do I start? This can be quite overwhelming. The short answer is any exercise is beneficial. And we know that Parkinson's is a very individual illness. So your capabilities may be different too. You may be someone who is already exercising many times a week, and this is not a problem for you. But there are a lot of people that do not exercise very often. And for them, starting may be very different than for other people. Also, keep in mind that it's not so important what kind of exercise you choose. It's more important to look at a higher intensity and vigorous exercise. So, exercise where you get your heart rate up, where you break a sweat, that's really the exercise that's most beneficial. And then also, it should be something that interests you because we want you to keep it up. And so you want to have something that you can maintain, hopefully several times a week for a longer period of time. And this shouldn't be something that creates problems with motivation, pain. Maybe it's too far away. So again, it should be something sustainable. There are formal exercise programs, and they can often focus on different aspects that can include strength, balance, coordination. Sometimes there are programs that combine all of those aspects, but sometimes just one of those. There's a lot of data on treadmill training in Parkinson's, so we know that that's beneficial. Resistant training, including weightlifting, can be beneficial as well. Alternative forms, yoga, tai chi, some of those things are included as well. And then, especially in the pandemic, we've seen a lot of utilization of more videos, YouTube videos, other things that you can do at home easily. Um, if you're not sure, always consult your doctor, consult your physical therapist. That's often very beneficial because again, it's not the same for everyone. So here you see a list of exercise activities that have been studied in Parkinson's and have been shown to be beneficial for the treatment of Parkinson's. This is not a complete list, but it's a list of activities that are often used. That includes biking. It can also be a stationary bike. It can be outside, dancing, tai chi, I already mentioned, Nordic walking, treadmill, weight training, boxing, running. So there's a long list, yoga. Don't forget about other things too, like music therapy. There are a couple of studies showing that using exercise with the Nintendo Wii can be beneficial. And then some data on non-exercise physical activity. So this can be yard work. It can be work that you do around the house. Sometimes it's hard to keep track there because it's not a structured program, but it's definitely better than not doing anything. So again, this may look different for the individual person. Just highlighting dance a little bit here because it can be fun for some people, in particular in Parkinson's, because dance can improve balance and gait function. And there are some studies that show even an improvement in quality of life in people that incorporate that. Tango has been studied in Parkinson's because it has walking as a basic step. So this is something that can be done for some people, and some people may enjoy it more than others. Again, this is just one example. And then the next question is, okay, I picked an exercise activity. I have a basic idea. How often should I do it? How long should I exercise? Again, this may look different for the individual person, but just some basic things that we recommend is number one, you want to exercise on a regular basis. That's very important. There are studies that compare short duration programs with long duration programs. And we know that programs that have a longer duration, 3 to 6 months or even longer, with it really any exercise intensity shows a greater benefit compared to a shorter duration program. I already spoke a little bit about the intensity aspect. So if you are able to do a more intense program, again, breaking a sweat, getting your heart rate up, that equals greater motor benefits. But we also understand that this can be limited in some people that are not able to do it. But we know that there is an effect on of intensity. Also, exercise should be sustained if you can. So typically what's recommended is something at least, 20, 30 minutes at a time. And for you to be able to keep it up and have an ongoing activity. Again, you may not be able to do this right away. Maybe you can only do 5 minutes at a time. Maybe you can do less. Maybe you can work that time up in the next few weeks. But the goal is to have something, if you can. Most studies recommend 3 times a week, 45 minutes each time. That would be ideal. Some people do more, some people do less, and that is okay as well. So this can be overwhelming. Again, you may be already dealing with medications, with physical therapy referrals, with support groups. So how do I fit exercise and all of this? Getting a diagnosis, or maybe you've had a diagnosis for a long time already. So again, we understand it can be overwhelming. So set realistic goals. Again, talk to your physician, your physical therapist. Also, we do recommend that you, if you can, should try to find a time when you exercise, when you feel good. So you want to find a time where your medications are working. You want to find a time, maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's in the afternoon, where you feel rested, where you're not in pain, so that you really get the best benefit and that you can maintain that exercise activity. So we don't want you to be in pain. We want to avoid injuries, and it does require patience. So just do what you can and start with a low amount if you have to, and then build your way up. I do want to speak a little bit about limitations, because that is a very real problem. Again, your doctor may tell you exercise, exercise, and then you go home and you find, but I have other things going on. I can't do it because I have heart problems, I have knee problems, I have hip problems. So those can be very real limitations. And then in Parkinson's in particular, there are some exercise routines that may put you at a higher risk of falling. So if you are somebody who is at a higher risk of falling, you may want to avoid those exercises and you want to minimize the risk of falling. So definitely, we do not want you to get hurt. One other very real thing too that we often see is in Parkinson's, often people have a sedentary lifestyle. And that may not be because they're not motivated, but it could be due to a combination of things like walking problems, stiffness, slowness, but also other things. We know that depression may reduce your motivation, and that's very common. Memory problems make it hard for you to remember exercises. Fatigue, apathy, all of those things are very real in Parkinson's, and we have to be aware of that and somehow incorporate that in an exercise program. I do want to speak a little bit about the last year, about the COVID-19 pandemic and how this has affected a lot of our patients. As you know, a lot of exercise programs were put on hold, community centers were closed, and the access to exercise programs are very limited. What we have often seen is a decline in physical functioning as a result. Other things that also played a role: care facilities were closed. So maybe your loved one was not able to visit you and take you out for a walk. So that's really affected motor function. There's data coming in that supports that over this past year, there has been a decline. Hopefully, with weather getting warmer, with programs opening up again, we do see an improvement. But that's certainly been a big problem, what we've seen. All right. So this is a more specific question, but I think it's a very interesting one. So if you're still not motivated to exercise, maybe this will convince you. And this is the question about: can exercise slow down the progression of Parkinson's? As we know, again, I already mentioned this, medications are limited in what they can do for you. They do provide benefit, of course, but again, there's some limitations. So what do we know from studies? We have quite a bit of animal studies that look at this question. And we see that after exercise, we can see that brain cells may be using dopamine more efficiently. Hypothetically, we think probably not an increased amount of dopamine, but dopamine is very important in Parkinson's, and many of you know this. Dopamine is a brain chemical that is produced by brain cells, and we all have these brain cells, but in Parkinson's, the production of dopamine is reduced, and as a result, we end up with motor symptoms, stiffness, slowness, tremor, and everything else that comes with it. So if we can use dopamine more efficiently as a result of exercising, that is really good news. One other really important piece is something called neurotrophic factors or neurotrophic growth factors. So these animal studies have shown that exercise induces and increases those neurotrophic growth factors. I mentioned two here. One is called GDNF, another one is called BDNF. There are other ones too. But those are neuropeptides that are responsible for the regulation of growth and protection of nerve cells. So if we have something like exercise that increases the amount of these neurotrophic growth factors, we think that exercise actually has a neuroprotective effect. And that's something that's really, really important. There are some human studies as well. The data from the human studies is a little bit less clear, mainly because it's harder to do these studies in humans, but they also support the idea that there is an increase in neurotrophic growth factors and maybe even an increase in volume of your brain after exercising for a certain amount of time. I think that's very exciting, and another reason why we think that exercise is so important. This slide is an oversimplified slide, but it again shows you the effect that exercise has on the brain in people with Parkinson's, the beneficial effect. We often talk about the structure of the brain, the basal ganglia. This is an area, several areas in the deep part of the brain, and this has something to do with this dopamine brain chemical that I just mentioned. So again, as a result of exercise, there's an effect on the basal ganglia in response, an increase in neurotrophic growth factors, dopamine, antioxidants. This can increase neuroprotection, reduction in oxidative stress, and then ideally a delay in the disease, or at least an improvement in function. Again, this is very oversimplified, but it gives you an idea about the positive effect that exercise can have on your brain. This is a pretty busy slide, but I can just kind of go over it quickly. And I do want to talk about this as well. And this is the effect that exercise has on cognition or memory problems. And this slide mainly talks about the effect that exercise has on the general population. So this is not Parkinson's specific, but certainly it can affect people with Parkinson's as well. So there's studies that show that physical exercise may be protective against dementia in the healthy population. There's one study that showed that any frequency of moderate exercise, if you do it in midlife or later in life, is associated with a reduced likelihood of developing even mild memory problems. And then individuals that already have mild memory problems, there's a study that looked at a group that did aerobic exercise versus stretching, and the people that did aerobic cardiovascular exercise had an improvement in their mild memory problems. And then another study showed an increase in brain size and memory improvement in older adults as a result of physical exercise. Again, this is not Parkinson's specific, but it really pertains to anyone, and another motivation, hopefully, to exercise. So what does that mean for Parkinson's? There are some studies that suggest improved areas of cognition in Parkinson's after exercising. We at our center did a small study looking at treadmill exercise in Parkinson's and cognitive function. This was, again, a small study with limitations, but we did see some positive trends there as well. Then a couple other things too that I put on the slide here that I think are interesting as well. We did talk a little bit about the basal ganglia, this area in the brain. One thing that is interesting is that the basal ganglia, they're responsive for automatic movement, motor responses. So that means that you don't think when you walk, you don't think when you swing your arms, when you take a step. But with the loss of dopamine, it affects the basal ganglia, and we see a reduced automatic responses in Parkinson's. So what does that mean? It means that if you have Parkinson's, you have to think about what you're doing more. You have to think about how to swing your arms. You have to think about taking a step. And that sometimes can be challenging for people that already have memory problems, and something that you want to keep in mind as well. But on the plus side, if you do exercise, you also, in some areas, especially with structured exercise program, you may have a cognitive benefit with physical exercise because, for example, you may get feedback from your physical therapist. You may have to pay more attention, dual tasking, amplitude training. So all of this does not just train your body, but also your mind. It's all combined, but I think this is a very interesting and important aspect of exercise as well. If you are looking for exercise programs, there are a lot of resources in the Twin Cities. The Parkinson's Foundation is an excellent resource if you look for programs, exercise programs. Again, some of them may still be closed because of the pandemic. But I just wanted to quickly mention that we at the Neuroscience Center in St. Paul also offer virtual group exercise groups for people with Parkinson's. There's a high intensity and a low intensity class. Just mention that just one of the many programs that is available. This is the end of my talk. Thank you so much. I will be available for questions later.
All right. So that is our first presentation. And next, I'd like to welcome Amanda Elliott, a physical therapist at the same location as Dr. Juliet Johnson, the Neuroscience Center, HealthPartners, Struthers Parkinson Center. Amanda Elliott is passionate about working with people with Parkinson's disease and other neurological disorders or vestibular disorders. She incorporates research-based treatments into her daily practice and maintains the LSVT, or Lee Silverman Voice Treatment, BIG certification. She has also attended a Parkinson's Wellness Recovery Retreat in Scottsdale, Arizona, which furthered her knowledge of large amplitude, high intensity training for people with Parkinson's. She teaches exercise-specific classes to Parkinson's disease and presents at educational outreach events, support groups, and local conferences, and even Zoom webinars like today. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I was scrolling through the pictures and I recognized a lot of names and faces, so that was fun to see. But yeah, thanks for having me. So what I wanted to do is take this time to answer some of the questions that were submitted to Erin when many of you signed up for the webinar. And after listening to Julia's presentation, I think you're going to hear a little bit of repeat, but I think I can help elaborate maybe on some of what she talked about too. So we'll answer those questions, and then I also wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about my recommendations for exercising right now during the pandemic, which Dr. Johnson did touch on a little bit too. There are no slides for my presentation, but I did create like a highlight sheet, so a sheet of all of the important takeaways from my discussion today that you will be getting afterward too. So Okay, so starting, one of the first questions that we got was what types of exercise have been found to be most beneficial? And then do cognitive exercises stall the onset of dementia and or cognitive deterioration? And if so, what cognitive exercises are recommended? So Dr. Johnson did a great job of talking about the different types of exercise, what the research has shown, but I wanted to talk about that high intensity exercise a little bit more. So like she mentioned, high intensity exercise is found to be most beneficial, but like, what does that mean? How do you do that? So it basically means moving bigger, moving faster, or exerting more effort. So I tell my patients to think about a scale of 0 to 10, and that scale is how much effort you're giving when you're exercising. All right, 0 is no effort, you're lying down. 10 is you're in a race or you're running a marathon. You know, we tend to choose like a comfortable level when we're exercising, and sometimes maybe we push it a little bit, but we don't often get to what's considered high intensity, which is like an 8 on that scale of 0 to 10. And that seems pretty high, and I think it can be a little bit difficult to get to that or even to maintain that. So what I suggest a lot of the time is to try to do little bouts of high intensity. So for example, if you're on a stationary bike or a recumbent bike, so to bike at a level 8, you know, putting out a level 8 intensity is a lot, and that's going to be really hard to maintain over that period of 20, 30 minutes, whatever you're doing on the bike. So I like to recommend intervals. So maybe you're going to do 4 or 5 minutes at a lower intensity, and then you do a burst of 1 minute or 30 seconds or whatever it is that you can do where you're really pushing it. You're going faster, you're pushing harder, you're really getting your heart going and feeling a little bit more out of breath, and that's going to be that higher intensity. So it doesn't have to be the whole exercise at a level 8, but maybe little portions of exercise throughout that have that burst of high intensity. Also, like the type of exercise you choose can determine whether it's high intensity. Boxing is a really good option for high intensity exercise. I feel, you know, looking at your faces and names, I know a lot of you have participated in some boxing, whether it be in therapy or there are a lot of really great programs in the Twin Cities that are boxing classes. But just that punching motion, that really intense, strong punching motion is high intensity. So again, the type of exercise you're doing could be high intensity as well. It doesn't always have to be the duration or the speed. And then talking about the cognitive exercise. So cognitive training is not my specialty, so I consulted with Carrie, a speech therapist at the Neuroscience Center, and she gave me some fantastic ideas. And, you know, she just really highlighted that, you know, we exercise our body and we need to exercise our brain too. And, you know, the exercises you do for your brain can maybe help to maintain the function of your cognition and your speech. So some suggestions she gave, and remember, I'm gonna tell you a lot, but I put them all on the handout that you're going to be getting. This is a fun one that I actually do a lot in therapy. It's called category naming. So, you know, whether it's when you're walking or just sitting there, even picking a category and then naming as many things as you can in that category. So, you know, I often do like boys' names, girls' names, food you're going to eat at Thanksgiving, cities in Minnesota. I mean, it can be anything. But that type of activity is a great cognitive training exercise. She mentioned taking a walk and just listing off items in your neighborhood, or maybe playing the category game while you're walking. So that's that dual tasking. You know, multitasking is a great way to challenge your brain. Board games or card games where you're having to concentrate on the game, but also talking and interacting with other people. Crossword puzzles, Sudoku. And then she also said there are some online brain training games that are really great. And there are some free options. I don't know if you've heard of Lumosity. But there are some options at lumosity.com that are free, and that would be fun to try. Again, I included that link on the sheet that you're going to receive. Some other fun ideas, watching a movie and then talking about it with someone afterward, trying to remember 3 to 5 of the main parts. So that's challenging your memory. And then I'll just touch on a few other ones. Getting out old pictures and trying to name the people or the places or the dates that they were taken. I mean, I think that would be fun to reminisce, but also a really good challenge for your brain. Reading a book out loud. This is something that could be very, very nice to do if you've got children or grandchildren. And she just said anything that's fun and that feels like it's giving your brain a workout is going to be great. So, you know, I may have missed a few, but you're going to find those on the handout. So like just an overview, we exercise our body, we need to exercise our brain too. So keep that in mind and maybe use some of those suggestions from Carrie, the speech therapist. All right, so one of the other questions that I received was, how can exercise and therapy help to avoid joint stiffness? And are there any exercises or activities that work best? And that's a really good question, because stiffness is a common complaint, or, it's something that I work on with my patients a lot. With Parkinson's, we usually see muscle rigidity or stiffness. And, it's something that you might wake up and have to deal with every day. So it's a really good idea to have, some exercises or stretches in your back pocket that you can use to deal with this. You maybe have heard the term motion is lotion. And that's true. So motion or mobility, it brings blood, it encourages blood flow. It brings blood to the joint. It helps things move better. So that's what we want to do to help combat that stiffness. So what I recommend is repetitive movement. When we hear stretching, we think about like, we stretch and we hold it for 30 seconds or a minute or something, right? Well, the most beneficial stretch, or for when we're talking about stiffness, is going to be dynamic stretching. So it's fluid movement, repetitive movement. So not necessarily holding a stretch, but getting into that position, hold it for a second, come back out. Get into that position, hold it, come back out. So repetition is going to be really great. In addition, to just general stretches, stationary bikes and walking, those are both really great ways to deal with the stiffness. A stationary bike, especially if you have stiffness in your hips or knees or ankles, just that repetitive motion, even at a really low intensity, can be a really great way to deal with that. So I wanted to show you a couple examples of some mobilization exercises that I give or that I would recommend. And typically this is if we're talking about stiffness in the arms or the trunk, which is pretty common. And then we'll get into the hips a little bit. And if you want to move with me and get a little bit of exercise, feel free to do that. But I really, we'll start with shoulder rolls. So I really like to recommend shoulder rolls. So you're just lifting your shoulders up and rolling them back. This feels really good. I find that I do this multiple times a day, especially if you're someone who's constantly sitting or working on a computer or something. We just get to where we're just, our shoulders are up by our ears, we're rounded forward. So that shoulder roll motion pulls those shoulders up and back. Okay, so that's a really nice one. I also like just reaching up towards the ceiling and then down towards the floor. So you're reaching way up. And in my exercise class, I make sure everyone has their hands open. So doing like flicks, like you're flicking water off of your fingers, but reaching up with those hands really wide and open, and then reaching down to the floor. So then you're getting some stretching through your low back as well. We're going to take that reach up and across our body now too. So you reach up and towards the wall to the side of you, just back and forth. So this one, you're going to feel kind of right in here through your shoulder, but also the side of your body or the side of your trunk. Okay, and then if you scoot forward a little bit, we can do a little bit for our trunk. We can get some rotation. So you reach across your body, like you're going to reach for something, across the room. But that allows you to rotate. You get good stretch through your arm again, but really good stretch through your trunk. Ooh, I see some people participating. This is good. Okay. Now this one you're not gonna be able to see me do very much, but you can do it with me anyway, just marching. So I'm just lifting my knees. I'm sitting in the chair, lifting my knees up as far as I can. So this one you can do in standing, you can do it in sitting. You can even do this lying down. So in bed in the morning before you get up, bend your knees and just start marching your knees while you're lying flat in bed. That works too. And then ankle motion, so heel and toe raises. So if you lift your toes up towards the ceiling, then push your toes down and lift your heels. So you're getting this back and forth motion. Same thing with this one. It can be done sitting, standing, or lying down. This one feels really good too. And then knee bends or squats. So this one you would do standing. You can hold on to a counter, a walker, a chair, anything, but just standing there, and I don't need you to go, all the way down to the floor into a deep squat or anything. We call it a mini squat. It's just a very small bend in the knees, just down and up, down and up. And that repetitive motion, just like I said, it brings blood flow to the knee joint and hip joints, and it just loosens everything up. So, if you're someone who deals with a lot of stiffness, I would recommend doing exercises like this in the morning before you get going. Then as you're moving around during the day, you might be feeling okay. And then maybe do some again, at night before bed, or if you've been sitting for a while, you're sitting there watching TV, reading a book, working, whatever it is, you might get stiff during that time. So wake or stand up, do a couple of these before you move on. So these are going to be on your sheet for reminders for home, okay? Okay, so let's move on to the next question. This one was about Lewy body disease, which is a type of movement disorder, and how exercises for people with Lewy body disease differ from those with Parkinson's. So basically, a lot of the times with Lewy body, the physical symptoms are the same, but there's the cognitive or the memory impairment that sets it apart. That's the difference, is the memory. And what I find can be difficult with exercise is just that carryover can be impacted. So if you come to therapy with me and I give you exercises to do at home, someone who has a memory impairment might not remember to do those or remember how to do it. And so then we don't see that carryover. So, what I recommend to people and to the caregivers is to use visual aids if possible. So on my part, I'm going to be giving handouts then. So pictures of the exercises. I often ask if someone at home can help facilitate those exercises. So either demonstrate them or just kind of help remind the person to do them, put that sheet with the exercises in front of them. Also, doing like a DVD, like a video where there's an instructor leading classes, or even attending a group class where there's an instructor led, so that the exercises are instructor led and it's not something that the person has to initiate themselves. So those would be some recommendations for dealing with memory impairment and exercise. So hopefully that helps with that question. And then I had mentioned I wanted to talk about exercising during like the COVID pandemic, and Dr. Johnson did touch on this a lot, and she mentioned the challenges, and I'm just going to reiterate those. So one of the biggest ones might be that your gym closed down, so you weren't able to go to the gym anymore. Some people maybe were attending a group exercise class in person that had to end. And another challenge to potentially doing this is, maybe people are worried about wearing a mask when they're exercising. They don't want to go back to the gym because they don't want to have to wear a mask. So I wanted to talk about those a little bit. So if the gym closed, if your class was canceled, some things to consider would be a video, like I mentioned, DVDs. There are some really great DVDs. There's chair yoga, there are balance exercises that you can do safely at home with a DVD. So even just looking on Amazon for something like that would be a good idea. And there are virtual classes. Dr. Johnson mentioned that we do have some at the Neuroscience Center. I know that there are some at other locations, but attending a virtual exercise class could be a great way to get back into exercise, but to do it safely at home. You know, I teach one of the classes that we have at the Neuroscience Center, and it's a very popular class. We have a lot of people attending. It's really fun. You know, I do the exercises too. I demonstrate them, and I get a workout. I end up sweating and out of breath. I mean, I know there's someone attending today who comes to my class, and he could probably say that, yeah, it works. So that's a really good option if you have the capability to do it. Talking about virtual options, you know, if it's been a long time since you've exercised for whatever reason and you feel like you're noticing changes, you know, with your balance, your walking, strength, whatever it is, considering seeing a physical therapist might be a good idea, just to kind of help reassess where you're at now and what you would really benefit from. You know, if you feel comfortable coming into a clinic, therapists are doing in-person visits and in a safe environment, or you could do virtual PT as well. I just wanted to talk briefly about if you're going to be doing virtual physical therapy or virtual exercise classes. I think one thing to keep in mind is making sure your space allows for it. So, you know, if you want to have your computer or your phone positioned in an area where the therapist can see you really nicely, and where you have room behind you to get up and either demonstrate for the therapist or do the exercises that are being recommended. I was telling Erin yesterday, I've done a few physical therapy evaluations for people while they were in their car driving, and you know, however I can help you whenever, I'm glad to do that. But it's going to be easier and you're going to get the most out of it if you can get up and move around a little bit. So try to think about your space when you schedule something like that. So, you know, if going somewhere isn't an option, I think considering purchasing some equipment that you could use at home would be something, you know, pretty easy to do. It doesn't have to be a fancy weight machine. I mean, if you really want to go all out and get a bike or a treadmill, I mean, that's obviously something that would be, you know, okay to consider as long as it's something you can do safely. But even just getting like really light dumbbells, 2, 3, 5-pound dumbbells, or those like stretchy TheraBands, you can do so much with weights and bands. And if you bought those, you could either consult with a PT and say, hey, can you give me some exercises I can use with these at home? Or you could look up on YouTube. There are videos for light dumbbell exercises. So there's a lot of options for things that you can do just at home in your living room. We can also go very basic and without equipment at all, just say move. No matter, you know, I don't care what it is that you're doing. You can, if you're watching TV, you know, every commercial break, you can stand up and walk laps around the living room. You could, you know, when you're doing dishes or brushing your teeth, do some of those things we talked about, rising up onto your toes, doing the little mini squats, kicking your leg out to the side or marching in place. You know, you can just find periods of time throughout your day. It doesn't have to be formal, but where you can just get a little bit of movement in. That would be very beneficial. And I wanted to talk quickly about wearing a mask with exercise. You know, they did do research on that, and they have found that there's actually no change in actual oxygen levels when you're exercising with a mask on. You feel like you're breathing heavier or working harder, but it's okay. It is safe to do that. So if you are wanting to go into therapy or into the gym and needing to wear a mask, that is okay to do that. You know, I guess I should say if you are someone who has breathing issues at baseline, it might be a good idea to consult with your doctor first to see what they have to say about that. But in general, it should be okay. And you know, a few days ago when I was prepping for this, the weather was beautiful. So I was going to just totally recommend go out and walk outside. And today, you know, from Minnesota, it looks a little bit different. But when weather is nicer and there's no snow on the ground, walking outside is such a great option for exercise. Dr. Johnson mentioned walking poles, Nordic walking poles, and I'm a huge fan of those. There's been a lot of research on those, and they have found that you end up getting 30%, you use 30% more muscle when you're walking with walking poles. So you get a really good workout. You know, even when I go out and demonstrate with people, I really feel it in my arms. We know that they help with posture, they help with balance, especially on uneven ground outside. They encourage arm swing, and we oftentimes see a lack of arm swing in people with Parkinson's. So something to keep in mind, especially too if you're someone who deals with pain. So using the poles, you can push down through them. It unweights your spine a little bit. So anyone who's got back pain, hip, knee pain, it is alleviated a little bit and allows you to walk further when you're using walking poles. So you don't have to get anything fancy. You know, I've had people get poles at Target. You can get them somewhere else, like an REI. There are tons of them on Amazon. You're just looking for a walking pole. Walking poles are going to be different than hiking poles. So look for a walking pole that is height adjustable. And when you're holding them in your arms, you want to, if you're standing up with those poles by the side of you, you want to have a little bit greater than a 90-degree bend in your elbow. You just don't want them too high where you can't really push down through them very well, or too low where it kind of makes you bend forward. But yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately there's no excuse to not exercise even when we can't go to a gym. There's a lot of things we can do at home or outside. So hopefully I gave you some ideas or some things to think about. So that's all I have for this section, but I'll be sticking around for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. We spoke yesterday about Nordic walking and mentioned the Nordic walking queen, Linda Lemke. And I was just looking at our blog and I just shared it in the chat, lindalemke.com/blog, and it links to a Star Tribune article that came out in December. And once I read that in December and I was out and about this weekend, I saw like 5 couples with Nordic walking poles or trekking poles. And I really think that this article brought attention to this opportunity to feel more stable and get a great workout in. So I shared that in the chat, and I'll also include that in our follow-up email.
Great.
All right. And I also see Dr. Johnson has joined us. Yeah, go ahead and unmute Dr. Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Amanda, for your excellent talk.
Well, sure. You too.
All right, Dr. Johnson, I have some specific questions for you. Getting down to the cellular level in Parkinson's. We got a question about someone interested in learning the role of exercise in mitochondrial neogenesis, as well as the role of mitochondria in Parkinson's disease.
All right, we're diving right into the specific questions here. That's fun though. So thank you for submitting questions, and so keep going as we're answering. I think to answer that, I just want to make sure that people understand that Parkinson's is a very complex illness, and what's going on in the brain is not just one thing. We always hear about dopamine. We always hear about the loss of dopamine, and that is one of the main central things that are happening in the brain. But there are lots of different things that occur on a cellular basis, on a brain basis, that lead to the loss of dopamine. So that includes inflammation, it includes neuroinflammation, it includes accumulation of iron in the brain. It includes accumulation of something called alpha-synuclein, which is a protein that's misfolded and leads to damage. It also includes mitochondrial dysfunction, and you may not know what that is, so I don't want to get into details here too much, but mitochondria are responsible for, play an important role in energy for the cells, and there's also something called a respiratory chain. And so because it's energy for the cells, and there's a loss of function in the dopamine producing cells, we do think that plays a role as well. Again, this is not just the only thing. There are a lot of different things going on as well. It has been looked at for many, many years now. Because of the respiratory chain, there is an effort in looking at antioxidants and medications that have that property. So there are studies looking at coenzyme Q10, creatine. There's another one that includes uric acid. So all of that has in some way or not, something to do with mitochondria and antioxidants. And I just saw coenzyme Q10 here, a question about that too. There's a very big study that was looked at years ago now, and it's safe in Parkinson's, but it's very well documented. It doesn't have any neuroprotective properties, so it doesn't really change the outcome. Same with creatine as well. So although I think people are still looking at different aspects right now, we don't have a medication that specifically targets that, or we think this is the answer to the cure. And I think that's where the challenge comes in as well. Because what we all want is we want a cure. We want this to go away. And so you may get frustrated because we're still using this carbidopa levodopa. It's been around for, I believe, 52, 53 years now. It's still our main medication. So why is there not a development, and why haven't we found something that makes it go away? And really, it's a very complex answer, but it's also because there's so many different things going on. So I believe that at some point there will be something that will make a significant difference, and it probably is going to be something that addresses different pathways, or maybe a combination of medications and treatment as well. So I kind of went off the path here, but I hope that answers some of your questions.
Great, thank you. All right, I think this could go for either one. Is there an exercise to increase circulation or blood flow to your feet? Is that specifically like a Parkinson's thing, or is that something that maybe more to the general public, if anyone has cold feet, any certain exercises?
Maybe, Amanda, maybe it's more a question for you. So a circulation problem is not primarily a Parkinson's problem, but having cold feet can happen a lot for different reasons. I think I would also advise to look maybe for different things too. So did you have something that's called a peripheral vascular disease, where some plaque buildup in the arteries that cause a reduction in blood flow, or maybe a peripheral neuropathy, so damage to the nerve endings? Amanda, I don't know if there's any specific exercises to increase blood flow, if you have an idea about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what you just mentioned about like peripheral neuropathy, I guess if we think about it that same way, so those would be people who have numbness or tingling, or like a cold feeling in their feet. Oftentimes I recommend like the ankle pumps that we talked about, so moving the feet up and down just to kind of help bring blood flow to the area. A lot of times, like massage or like squeezing your foot can help, again, bring blood flow. And rolling, if you have like a water bottle, maybe not super cold, but just rolling your foot over top of a roller or a water bottle or something that just kind of helps massage the base of the foot. Again, that repetitive movement can bring blood flow. That's usually what I recommend for that type of those types of symptoms. But I think in general, anything in weight bearing where you're standing and moving is going to help get blood circulating through your feet and through your legs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Johnson, another question. Is muscle wasting part of Parkinson's? This person shared they have lost a bit of weight and seemingly muscle mass too, despite daily exercise, walking, elliptical, biking, and balance exercises.
Okay, good question. So if we as neurologists hear muscle loss, we think of something that's called atrophy, which is muscle loss, but it's due to a usually brain or spinal cord dysfunction. This is not a primary symptom of Parkinson's. However, Certainly, we do see other things that may look like muscle loss. So physical deconditioning, that's something that we see a lot. That can you can lose muscle mass by not using. In your case, it doesn't sound like that's the case. The person who submitted the question seems like they're doing a great job with exercising. But you also mentioned weight. So if you lose weight, you can lose muscle mass as well. So I think that's something that you want to look at as well. So make sure that you have your calories, your protein. That's really important as well. It's if there is a doubt, go see your doctor, have an exam to make sure that there's nothing else going on as well. So I don't think there's one particular answer for this, but I wouldn't. So atrophy per se is not a neurological finding in Parkinson's.
Okay, so make sure you connect with your doctor and tell them what's happening. All right, Amanda, what is the target heart rate when doing exercises?
Yeah, so I think that's going to vary per person and kind of depending on what type of exercise you're wanting to do. If we're looking at moderate level intensity, I think that's usually like 60 to 80% of your max heart rate, and max heart rate is 220 minus your age. So if you do that calculation, that'll give you the number of that's the top number. That you shouldn't go over that for heart rate. And then if we figure out the percentage of, if you're looking at moderate intensity, if you're going to go high intensity, that's probably more like 80% of that. So I don't oftentimes use heart rate as an indicator when I'm doing exercise. I use more that scale that I mentioned that is called the Borg rating of perceived exertion. So that's that 0 to 10, how hard are you working? And we're working towards that level 6 or 8. But I think it probably does correlate with heart rate. The harder you're working, the higher the intensity, the higher your heart rate. But I guess I would keep in mind that 220 minus age is your max heart rate. And then you don't want to be exercising at max heart rate though the whole time. So, kind of going maybe 60 to 85% of that.
Okay, I also have heard the example, if you don't have a heart rate monitor or not watching that closely, if you're exercising to the level where you can't talk to your neighbor, that is like a great point to recognize that you're working hard.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. And you do want to get to that point, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, intensity does matter. So yes, so I would say 60 to 80 of what we call submax heart rate is what's recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right, Amanda, as you've been in the clinic, you might have a person with Parkinson's come in with their care partner, caregiver. So this is a caregiver question, is she is often encouraging her loved one with Parkinson's and pushing exercises too much. How can I help encourage her? And she has balance of feeling of giving up due to being sore, but how can you help with like the motion is lotion, as you had shared that idea?
Yeah. So it sounds like, I guess I want to make sure I'm interpreting this right, that like you're trying to encourage the person at home to exercise, but maybe they're pushing back a little bit, not wanting to do it as much. And that's extremely common. So, I would say almost 100% of the time that's what's going on at home. And so, I really try to mention to the patient or the person with Parkinson's that encouragement, those reminders, those cues that we call them, are so important. Just because a lot of times some of the impairments or some of the issues the person doesn't necessarily feel or see, and so we need that external help to do that. And motivation to exercise is really, it's hard. One of the hardest things about exercising is getting started. So to have somebody to encourage you, that is really good. But I think, just sitting the person with Parkinson's footsteps for a second, that can probably get annoying to have somebody continually tell you to do it. I think that if it is really a struggle, maybe consider a physical therapist to kind of help be that person, take that off of you, let us encourage that person, whether that means coming into therapy or doing something virtually or just at least doing some education. But I think just remembering too that exercise is so beneficial. It does, you can move better during the day after you've moved. Usually you feel better usually. And it doesn't have to be, I always tell people too, it doesn't have to be an hour or, even 30 minutes. It could be something very simple, very short, or maybe try breaking it up throughout the day. So if it seems like doing 20 or 30 minutes at one time is not going to happen, kind of what I mentioned earlier about just getting up and doing a few laps in the living room or even in the chair doing some marching or kicking or something. So maybe just like 5 minutes here and there throughout the day, that might be easier. It might seem like it's more doable rather than having to set aside all the time to do the exercise. So I guess in general, maybe shorter bouts, more often, or like maybe every other day. I try to be realistic. I think ideally you're moving or exercising daily, but that's not going to happen for some people. We have other things going on in our lives. Some days we don't feel like it, and I think that's fine. So if we need to take days off here and there, if they're really fighting back and not wanting to do it that day, okay, well, let's try it the next day. And again, if that's really seeming to be a struggle, come into therapy and I can yell at them and get them to move.
I think I would also add to that, you may want to look at what is the reason for the pushback, because there are lots of different reasons. Is it because that person is in pain? Is it because there's a level of depression that then leads to lack of motivation? We have mentioned that apathy is something that's very common in Parkinson's. So there may be lots of different factors. So try to address them if you can. And I would agree with Amanda too. Be realistic, but keep it going. That's the main thing. And even if it's 2-3 times a week, even if it's just for a few minutes, just keep it going as much as you can.
Do you ever have suggestions of like thinking outside the box? Like you get to know the patient and so you come up with more creative ways. I know for myself, sometimes I don't like to exercise and so I just put on music and like dance around the house. Do you have any of those like stories, or am I the only one that's jamming out in my house?
No, I mean, I think you're right. Dr. Johnson, I know you mentioned this, choosing something that you enjoy or something that is fun is going to be the best type of exercise, because that's going to be something you're going to want to continue to do. So, if you don't like a treadmill, then don't walk on the treadmill. I don't want you doing something that you hate, because it's ideally something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So it needs to be sustainable. So yeah, if dancing, even you mentioned music, like maybe you don't want to do a formal exercise routine, but if you like to dance, hey, that's movement. That's okay. I do try to differentiate between activity and exercise, because I'll have patients who say that they golf and that's their exercise. There is exercise to that. I do, unless you're driving the cart. But either way, that I consider activity. So you do want to be active. You want to have activity like that, but also do some formal exercise. But yeah, put music on. We've mentioned this before, but if you're someone who's busy, you've got a lot going on, you're doing the dishes, you're doing laundry, so you're folding the towels while you're doing some mini squats or something. You can try to incorporate it here and there, but I guess I don't have any actual examples, but I think music, dancing, and again, just something that you enjoy doing, taking walks outside with family or neighbors or something, all of that is good.
All right, thank you. As you mentioned, if you don't like treadmills, that brought me up another question about for Dr. Johnson. Can you share a little more about the treadmill training that you conducted in the research? and what exactly that looked like?
Yes, I think you're referring to our study that we did a few years back. So this was a small study, and if you type in exercise and Parkinson's in PubMed, which is the website that publishes all the reliable research, I think you get over 3,000 entries of in studies. So this has been researched a lot, and so we just did a small part of that, but we had. I believe we had 24 participants, people with Parkinson's, and we looked at cognition as an outcome. We looked also at motor function as an outcome, and we used treadmill training, 12 weeks of training, 3 times a week, 50 minutes each time. And we had these 2 groups. One started earlier, one started later. So again, this was a small study. We did not see really significant difference in motor function, except for some of the areas that we looked at, but not overall motor function. In cognition, overall, there was not a significant change, but we did see some trends with improvement in working memory. So just kind of narrowing it down to the different aspects. But also people were able to maintain the exercise program. I think we had about over 80% of people that continued the program and enjoyed it. And we incorporated the treadmill training and exercises after the study as well. So I think that was fun to see. Again, this was just one of many studies that were done.
Thank you. Amanda, any exercises to improve micrographia, or that when you have smaller handwriting, or maybe even fine motor skill exercises?
Yeah, so this would be a really great question for an occupational therapist, but I can give you some suggestions for what I would recommend.
We do have an occupational therapist presenting in May. So I will save that question for May, but you can give us some pointers right now. We appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, what I've seen that they've done just by, working with OTs for a long time, when we do physical activity and even speech, the general concept is large amplitude. So moving like bigger than you think you have to. And they do that with handwriting too. So I've seen where, you'll pick a word or a sentence or whatever, and they have you write it exaggerated. So very big. And it's the same idea with movement. With Parkinson's, we see movements get smaller. And so to counteract that, to get back to more of a normal movement, we have to exaggerate. So big, that's the term we always use. So the same thing goes with the handwriting, doing really exaggerated big movements when you're writing. That's what I've seen most for that. I think in general for fine motor things, I've talked about like flicking water. So activities that encourage like strong, powerful movements with the fingers, opening the hands, all of that is going to help. And one thing that came to mind, there was a research study on cycling. And this is just by the way, they did a tandem biking, and they found that at really high intensities, they had the most benefit, but people's handwriting was better after that. So I don't know, there might be something to say that doing just big high intensity exercise, you might find that in general everything is bigger afterward. But I think just in mind, keeping in mind that moving bigger, large amplitude, exaggerated movement would be helpful.
Awesome. Another question for you. Have you found benefits to using a metronome to encourage a certain pace for walking or for any exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. Metronome is a really great tool to use. Again, I see, not only do we see smallness of movement, but we also see slowness of movement. So using the metronome as just setting a pace for exercise, for walking is great. I would say one thing, there are different types of cues that we use to encourage better movement. And we use visual cues, auditory cues, and then like tactile or physical cues, and not one works for everybody. So I have some people that I turn a metronome on and it just doesn't click with them. It doesn't work, but they do better with like a visual cue. So I guess I would say maybe it won't work 100% of the time, but if the person responds to auditory cues, a metronome is a really great option. Trying to find a comfortable pace and just trying to keep the steps in line with that. If you don't have a metronome, you could use music too. I worked with a music therapist in Golden Valley, and I think like big band music or like marches are really good ones to use, but you could find any music that you enjoy that's not too fast, that has a good kind of strong, noticeable beat. But yes, I really like to incorporate that if the person responds to it.
So another tool in the toolbox to try.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, one more question for you, Amanda. Could you suggest any exercises for neck and shoulder stiffness other than shoulder rolls?
Yeah. So the shoulder rolls are going to be a good one. Another one for, a lot of times if our necks are stiff or sore, if we're weak in our upper body, like in our thoracic spine, so our upper back, and a lot of times we are, or we have postural impairment, so we're, rounded, that puts our head forward, that puts a lot of strain on the muscles in the front and the back of the neck. So a lot of what we'll do is strengthening those scapular muscles. So thinking about shoulder blade squeezes. So, imagining you've got like $1 bill and you're pinching it together with your shoulder blades. So you're kind of opening your chest, squeezing your shoulder blades back. If you have that stretchy TheraBand, you can tie it around a doorknob, put your arms out in front of you, I'm trying to get in a good position here, and pull straight back. So a lot of exercises that encourage opening the chest, strengthening the back. Sorry, I went dark for a second. Just doing exercises where you're like, again, opening the arms, bringing them back in together, opening the arms, but just trying to loosen up the upper back too, I would say would be great. Neck range of motion is always going to be beneficial. So just side to side, looking over your shoulder. Again, I wouldn't hold it. I would just do repetitions. But yeah, so I guess I think if it is something that's really, really limiting you or it's very bothersome, I would definitely maybe consider checking in with a PT for a specific program for you, trying some things out and seeing what works best, getting something more specific. But in general, range of motion and getting your upper back stronger and more mobile will be helpful.
Okay. Do you ever suggest heating or icing as well?
Yeah, that's all fine for pain relief. If it's an issue that's been going on for a long time where we would consider it chronic, you can use ice or heat. Some people respond better to one or the other. I think when it comes to like stiff muscles, heat oftentimes works better because it helps relax things, whereas ice, I feel like maybe tenses up a little bit more. But if you don't like heat and ice feels better, go ahead and do that. So that can provide some temporary relief. And sometimes it's good to do that, after you've just exercised them, or even it's nice to heat sometimes before, if it helps to loosen those muscles, then you can move them around a little bit better.
Great, thank you. All right, Dr. Johnson, I have 2 questions and we're wrapping up on time. So if anyone has any last minute questions, please put them in the chat. Dr. Johnson, this is not related. So are you up for taking just a general PD question?
Sure.
Okay. Is decreased taste and smell part of Parkinson's? This person shares it's hard to eat enough. And would you recommend seeing a dietitian?
Yeah, so loss of sense of smell is something that we do see in Parkinson's. It's not specific to Parkinson's, but it's something that we see early on. We even consider it a prodromal symptom, meaning a symptom that can happen before you even develop any motor symptoms, years before. That can certainly happen. Again, it's not specific. We can see it in Alzheimer's disease as well. We can now with COVID, that's something that's very interesting, and we see it happening. People that have COVID or had COVID, and there are some interesting papers kind of discussing what does that mean if you had COVID and you lost your sense of smell. Does it mean that you had a higher risk of developing Parkinson's? We don't know the answer to that, but I thought there's some interesting discussions going on. So yes, it can be a symptom. Not everybody has it. Usually it's something that is chronic if it does happen, because it's due to a loss of cells and function. Seeing a dietitian it's not going to change the sense of smell, but if you have a loss of sense of smell and that leads to not eating as much and losing weight, because it can affect the taste as well, then it may be a reason to see a dietitian and see how you can increase your calories. That may be good for other reasons too. There people have questions about when to eat, when to take their medications, about when you exercise, what's the best diet. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to see a dietitian. It may not be specific to the sense of smell.
Okay. Another question is, what do you see on the horizon in relation to exercise and Parkinson's, or any clinical trials that are happening?
So is the question specific to exercise
yeah, if you see anything on the horizon related to Parkinson's and exercise, and then any clinical trials that you know that are happening, or
yeah. So as I just mentioned earlier, there are a lot of studies published already in exercise and Parkinson's, and before this presentation, I kind of looked at the number of studies published, and there was a huge increase of studies published to just looking at this subject. A few years ago, it has decreased the number of studies now, because again, we feel like a lot of things we already know. So I think people are now looking at, and there's still studies being published, but it's so well established that just kind of doing another exercise study and showing that it improves motor function and maybe cognition may be interesting, but more interesting maybe looking at other things like biomarkers. I just mentioned this goal of having a medication that stops or slows down the progression. And so ideally, you want to do that. You want to use that medication even before symptoms start. So you want to identify people that are at risk, and ideally finding something like a marker that you can find in the blood, in the spinal fluid, in the skin, or another symptom. So we know that people that have this REM behavior disorder, which is acting out your dreams, have a much higher risk of developing Parkinson's. So focusing on that and finding something that we can use, where we can test people early on, and then finding something that it addresses the disease itself. And then I want to mention to that too, what I mentioned earlier. Remember, again, this is a complex illness that's happening. There's lots of different things going on. There's a very interesting article that was just published in the Journal of Movement Disorders, which is a big journal where a lot of the Parkinson's studies are being published, with the question of how do we do this? How do we find a medication? And the article talks about all the different aspects that are happening, and really coming to the conclusion that, at best, we find something early, we identify the right people, because everybody with Parkinson's is different too. It's not that you have, one type of diabetes and you do the study. So it's a lot easier to find people that participate in studies, and then ultimately come up with a medication that addresses not only one thing, but everything. So you can think of things like in HIV treatment, there's a combined medication that looks at, or that addresses different things that are happening, and it's very successful. This is a completely different illness, so don't compare that, but it's just an example that I think ultimately it has to be something that addresses all different kind of things, including exercise, but it's not the only thing. Another long-winded answer.
Well, there's hope. There's a lot of things coming. That's all I was looking for. All right, well, that wraps up our time. Dr. Johnson and Amanda, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any parting words or words of wisdom you want to share before we wrap up?
I just want to thank everyone. It's always great to be part of this. I want to thank the Parkinson's Foundation also for putting this on and organizing these things. So thanks to everyone who tuned in today. And some of them we may see in person again. If not, you can reach out and ask questions offline as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Johnson. Just thank you to everybody. But I would say just keep your eyes open. At the Neuroscience Centers in particular, we're in talks of some new options, maybe trying to bring people back to in-person safely for some exercise classes. And I'm working with people in the clinic. So just maybe keep your eyes open for what's to come. Hopefully as things get better, we can start to have some new offerings and get more people involved.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you two so much for sharing your time and expertise with the Parkinson's community. And to all our attendees for joining us for today's program. If we were not able to answer your question, we encourage you to reach out to the helpline. We greatly appreciate your feedback from today's program by completing the survey that will be included in the email next week. Your feedback helps us plan future programs. So if anything was off or you like the day of time or the length, please let us know. And a reminder that email will also include the link to view the recording and slides and some resources that were shared today. And another thank you to our sponsors, Amneal, Synovian, and Supernus for making today's program possible. And just a look ahead, we've got programs available Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Join us for Monday, Mindfulness Mondays, and Wednesdays, Wellness Wednesday. And tomorrow, we have newly diagnosed living with Parkinson's. To learn more, visit parkinson.org/pdhealth. And a little preview of what's coming up in the Minnesota area. We have 2 virtual programs, so any of our friends from across the country can join as well. I'm super excited for our April 16th Spring Parkinson's Symposium in partnership with the APDA Minnesota and mHealth Fairview. We'll have 6 speakers talking on topics like sleep, driving, research, and new technology to manage symptoms. And then the next week, Saturday, April 24th, we're reaching early onset Parkinson's disease strategies for living well, featuring neurologists from the Mayo Clinic. So you can check all those out at parkinson.org/events. And lastly, please know you are not alone. We are here for you. If you have any questions, please reach out to us by calling our 1-800-4PD-INFO or emailing the helpline at parkinson.org. And if you have any questions or need any resources, that's your go-to spot. So thank you again for joining us today and have a great afternoon. Take care.